sufficient and robust job creation. And we've seen in terms of earning power of middle-income families, in real terms, basically stagnant over 10 years. So families were challenged in terms of job opportunities, challenged in terms of income growth, and then we saw potentially a huge financial crisis, meltdown of our financial system. There are multiple causes. Some of them begin with an economic philosophy that the market was more effective and efficient than any regulatory body, and therefore the virtue and value of regulations was diminished. Rational markets theory was the powerful economic doctrine, not just of the last 10 years, but probably going back 20 plus years. But what resulted in that, in practice, was a lax enforcement atmosphere in terms of enforcing rules and regulations. Again, the sense that regulation would not be effective, in fact, it would hinder economic growth. A huge growth in financial engineering, the ability to use sophisticated computer programming and huge computing power to figure out new financial products, some of which were so complicated that both investors and promoters didn't fully grasp, I think, the potential consequences. And then there was a situation in which a low interest rate environment made borrowing extremely attractive. And so not only households, but businesses became highly leveraged. So when this crisis erupted, there was not the resilience or the residual strength of savings, both corporate savings and household savings, to sort of weather the storm. All of these factors came together, and many, many more. The biggest issue that we faced is, in my mind, is employment. That was the point at which we really started losing not only economic momentum, but in many cases a sense of confidence that we could get through this. When President Obama took office, we were losing 700,000 jobs a month. Last month, for the first time in 3 years, we could report a gain of about 162,000 jobs. Now, that's just necessary to accommodate those new entrants into the labor force. So we have to do much, much better to begin to reduce the unemployment rate and to give people the security and confidence that their job will be there. And that's the major challenge we face today. Related to the issue of employment was the issue of housing value. Because in an environment, those 10 years where there was no significant income growth, where there was limited job opportunities, homes became a replacement for the discretionary income you usually earn at the workplace. You got the raise, etc. They became, in some respects, as been described, as sort of everyone's ATM. Before the crisis, at the height of the housing boom, the housing value of the United States was roughly $64 trillion. It hit a low point of about $48.5 trillion. Now it's up to $54.2 trillion. So we're moving in the right direction in terms of housing value, but we're still roughly $10 trillion less than we were 2 years ago. And that has huge consequences, not in terms of just macroeconomics, but also in terms of the opportunities and the abilities of families to cope. One of the other aspects of this particular crisis, something different than previous one. In 1982, we had our unemployment rate nationally of 10.2%, which is roughly the high water mark of this recession. Today we're at 9.7, and it's too slowly coming down. But in 1982, this is more anecdotal than analytical, the effect was typically on younger workers in their 20s, who many of them, I think, saw this as a mixed blessing because not getting a job gave one the opportunity to go off and explore Europe and go skiing in Aspen, etc. But also it hit transient workers, people who had a history of being in and out of the workforce. One of the real changes is that this recession has hit unusually people in their 40s and 50s, many of them with bachelor's degrees or more, so that this is unexpected in that aspect too. And it is really adds to the complications in the situation. I think people, contemporaries, who have worked very hard, have done everything they should in terms of their preparation, their work, find themselves being downsized, being let go at a time in their 40s, 50s or more, where it's extremely difficult to bounce back. That has added an extra dimension to this crisis, an extra human dimension that we have to be conscious of. The response, first response was initiated by President Bush, and Secretary Paulson, was to stabilize the financial institution. Their fears, and both Paulson and Chairman Bernanke, was that we were on the verge of not just a recession in the sense of climbing unemployment, but a worldwide collapse of the financial system, which would have had consequences all across the globe, and particularly dire consequences here in the United States. The next major step was, in the initial part of the Obama administration, was to pass the Recovery Act. That act has provided some stability, some forward momentum, and probably more importantly, appeared to stop the downward slide. There was a concern December, January of 2008, 2009, that we could see the stock market, for example, go down as low as 5,000. It's now up to almost 11,000. Not at this high, but it's come up. There was a fear that basic lending, not just the big companies, but the people on the street, would be jeopardized. There was, for the first time, a major mutual fund, the reserve fund, that, as they say, broke the buck. They could no longer guarantee that they would redeem dollar for dollar the investment that you had in a mutual fund. The other factor was the drying up of interbank lending. Rates to borrow one bank to another shot up from the order of 20 basis points, 0.2%, to 300 plus basis points, a huge. So the financial system was on the verge of literally collapse. It stabilized. Now we've got to get it deployed so it is providing credit efficiently to small businesses throughout the country. We're not there yet, and if we don't get there yet, our recovery will be slowed up significantly. With the Recovery Act, though, we were able to first pass tax cuts. That was the first big part, which went out immediately, provided some stability to demand. And second, it was aid to states. The state of Rhode Island has received, or will receive in these 2 years, $1 billion. They used, for example, $226 million to go right into the state budget, which allowed teachers to remain hired, firefighters to remain on station, police officers to be there, and avoided even more significant tax increases at the state and local level. I was with the Wesley Chief of Police yesterday. They were able to retain 3 police officers that otherwise would have been let go because of their financial difficulties. The other aspect of this is beginning to invest in the infrastructure. One of the things that's happened in Rhode Island, we've been able to secure $20 million for improvements at Quonset Point so that we can hopefully be the place where fabrication of these wind towers all across and up and down the East Coast will be centered. But that $20 million will be used for improvements here in the state.